Last day. FANGORN Forest.
FANGORN Forest, best for last.
Gonna be epic. 3-hour dive.
Only 3 hours.
I mean,
well, we gotta do the night dive tonight.
Oh, that's, yeah, of course. And the one before the flight tomorrow?
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
Welcome everyone to dive number 4 of our Abaco trip in 2023. This is the last dive of the trip. Unfortunately, we left FANGORN Forest for our last dive, and yet again I will be commenting. So here we are doing our dive. Now, if you notice, I'm going to pause right here for a second. I promise this will be quick. There's an extra tank that I'm carrying. Brian is also carrying an extra tank, and the person filming, Benjamin, who was the diver on dive number 1 and 3, also is carrying a tank. We are staging tanks for this dive because this dive is long, is far, is deep into the cave, and we're also going through some deep passages as we make our way to FANGORN Forest. This will be the first one. This is a few minutes into the dive, I think about 10 minutes or so. This is an almost 3-hour dive. I think it was 2 hours and 56 minutes or something like that. So almost 3 hours. So obviously we don't have all 3 hours. We didn't film all 3 hours either. But this is like 8 to 10 minutes into the dive, I believe, maybe a little bit more. And we're about to go into our first deep passage, which is about 45 meters, or 150 to 155 feet. So you can see Brian is all the way down there almost. This is the lip, or the, you know, the kind of the arch that we have to dip under. And we're going to swim maybe about 10 meters or so, 30 feet or so at that depth. And also I'm following him, and obviously Benjamin is following me and filming. So here we're dipping down under that arch. You can see Brian is going. Now this arch is really the first place where I'm like super careful because of this. This is dry mud from who knows how long ago, thousands of years ago, whatever, when this cave went from wet to dry on the last ice age probably, or a couple of ice ages ago, and then it went back to wet. It went back to flooded, so we don't want to touch it, we don't want to disturb it. And you can see there's not a whole lot of space, so I'm kind of going through it. In some cases, by the way, I carry that staging tank like a football, like a rugby ball. Like I'm picking it up like a baby because I don't want it to be bashing into anything. So yeah, this whole bottom right here is dried mud from a long time ago. And honestly, like maybe if I were to touch it, it would be like rock solid, you know, because when, I don't know if you've seen mud when it dries out there, you can walk on it and nothing will happen to it. It just dries into like rock solid. But I'm not going to find out. I'm not going to touch it and try to figure out if it really is rock solid or not. So here we are. I'm swimming with my stage. Now there's one thing I'm going to point it out if you haven't noticed, because it bothers me. Is my tank. My bailout tank on the left is sticking up. It really bothers me. So I'm just pointing it out. Notice how it's sticking up a little bit, right? It should be parallel with my body, and it's not. And what that does is that by doing that, and that is probably from the day before the glass factory dive, by doing that, it's kind of pulling me a little bit higher. So I use my right hand to correct myself a lot more in this dive, which also bothers me, by the way. So here Benjamin is filming me dropping my stage. So the total penetration for this dive is a little over 3,000 feet, so it's almost a kilometer inside this cave. So about every 300 or so meters, about every 1,000 feet, we are dropping a brand new tank. So not just the one that we're carrying with us for bailout. You can see my hand just going. I look like an orchestra director here. What am I doing? This is ridiculous. But you can see I dropped my tank. So Benjamin dropped first. I told him, look, you drop first 1,000 feet into the cave because you're filming. So I want you to be more you know, ready to go filming, and then I'll carry the second stage. And Brian always chooses to carry the last one. He's the one diving the furthest with the stage, but it doesn't bother him. You can see he'll carry the whole time, and he stops to show us stuff. Anyway, there's a lot of swimming in this thing, thousands of feet of swimming, and everywhere you look is stalactites and stalagmites. Some of them really, really big. You can see that one right behind my fins. That thing is like, I don't know, like 5 meters tall or something, maybe less. 5 meters is too much. 3 probably, like 15 feet tall. There's several like that, and of course if you kick it, it's over. It's gone. Some of them have broken. Look at this one right here, right? And that's because the floor kind of breaks apart. Like at some point there's so much weight on this floor that collapses. There's several places in the Abaco caves where the floor has completely collapsed. That one is only like barely apart, but in some places it's like, I mean, meters and meters, and you know, it's just, there's a lot of separation between the top piece and the bottom piece, like as tall as a car kind of thing. So Benjamin here is showing some features of the cave. Look at that thing. It dried up like that. Like everywhere else in this cave, control of your trim and buoyancy is paramount. Look at those big wedding cakes. Huge towers of crystal. They're completely crystal. You can see I'm doing my hands like, ah. It's just amazing. And the ceiling is crazy. I'm glad Benjamin got to point the camera up. By the way, drinking game, if you're watching this and it's Friday night, Saturday night, whatever, every time Benjamin says awesome and you get to hear it, you should take a shot or get a sip of whatever you're drinking. Dive talk drinking game for this video. Unless you're diving. If you're diving, don't drink. Or driving. But look at this ridiculousness. Perfect crystal everywhere. Here I am moving my hand. Ugh. Dropping a cookie. Telling Benjamin, hey, I'm dropping this cookie. And Brian is making the jump to FANGORN Forest. The most ornamented underwater cave in the world. We're about to go to it. This is Ben's first time in FANGORN Forest. This is my second time. And every time is awesome. This is me. Look at how big this is. Just opening my arms like, look at this. I'm diving the Kiss Psychic. It's a side mount rebreather. And you can see it right here on my right. It's hanging on the right. It looks like a tank, but it's not. It's a rebreather. And on the left, I have my bailout and diluent tank, which is an aluminum 80. How big this room is to getting to FANGORN. But once you get to the entrance, which is designated by a cookie or a marker on the line that says FANGORN Forest, once you get into that entrance, it gets a little tight and you're surrounded by formations, so you have to be ultra careful. In this area right here is pretty big. You're not gonna break anything unless you totally lose control, I guess, but you know, a lot more room to move, but you'll get to see it. And I do point out the cookie because last year I didn't bring a camera to my FANGORN dive. This year, like I mentioned on the last dive, Brian allowed us to do it, so I wanted to point the cookie. Look at that. FANGORN Forest. We made it. Yes. Here we are, buddy. We made it, he said. You can see some of these columns have toppled over. Again, it's just erosion, right? Below the columns are heavy. Crystal is, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is scientifically accurate or a fact, but to me, it feels like crystal is heavier than rocks. Like if you get a piece of crystal and you get a rock of the same size, then the crystal will be heavier. And I know some people are going to drop in the comments and be like, actually, depends on the rock. If it's a volcanic rock, then no. If it's, yeah, whatever. Like you can leave your comments below because I know you're right. It depends on the rock. I'm sure there's some rocks that are denser, or you know, they're heavier in a way, like maybe the rocks they use for curling, which I think I remember a document. Look at that ridiculousness on those details. He's gonna stop by on the way back, by the way. You don't have to rewind yet. We'll stop by on the way back. But back to the documentary, which has nothing to do with diving. I think all the like the curling rocks in the world come from like an island in Scotland or something. I don't know why that just came to me, but I feel like I remember reading that. Look, crystal everywhere. This is again the most ornamented cave in the world. Brian believes that this is the #1 cave dive in the world. Doesn't get better than this. Although we feel that the glass factory dive is better. Me and Benjamin. But, you know, we might be the only ones. Well, I look up. It's crazy. Look at all this stuff. I see Brian's pointed it out too. Now, the briefing for this dive is ultra long as well. It's like 30 minutes to 1 hour. But it's a 3-hour dive. So he does a really good job. Brian does a really good job briefing this whole thing. Telling us the things we're going to see. Where we're going to drop our bottles, how he's going to tell us where we are, and also the things that we should be careful about. You know, obviously we want to be careful about everything, but there are some specific things, like very, very thin stalactites, for example. There used to be 2 twin stalagmites, rather. That's so awesome. There you go, shot #1. But somebody broke one of them. So Brian said, you know, be careful because I only have one left. So see how it's cracked? That one also just erosion, right? Made it break. No diver broke that. It's just nature. There's so much stuff. Now on the way back, I promise you, Ben will actually stop by and spend more time filming all this area. So you'll get to see it in a lot more detail. Look at that stuff. Yeah, he's like, touchdown. So he said these are called the goalposts, where you guys are going to swim through those two. It reminds me of a touchdown. So that's what he was saying. Touchdown. Now, again, I'm still kind of under the effect of the high from the Cozumel trip, where we went cave exploring, looking for passages. Isn't this awesome? Yep, drink. I'm like, yeah, I told you. Look at this stuff. But one of the things that you'll notice is when I find a hole, there's like nothing to see except for a hole. Here you go. You guys will be drunk by the end of this video. If I see a hole, I'm always like aiming my light at it and being like, "What? I wonder what's down there." It's pretty funny because I didn't do any of that on the first time I was in Fangorn. I was just, you know, looking at all the cool stuff, which I am doing here too, but there's leads. Look at that stuff. The one thing that you don't get from this video is the size of some of this stuff. I know it looks small, it looks super thin, and some of it is small and thin, but in other cases it's just super, super massive. Like especially the wedding cakes at Fangorn are the biggest ones that I've ever seen. Expanding out. Just look at that. On the left hand side, it's just a ton of stalactites and stalagmites coming up. So you can see that thin column right there. He's like, go that way. Do not come close. So apparently that one had a twin. And it was like across. It's probably like this right here or something like that. I doubt it because the line goes through it. It was probably further away. But anyway, it had a twin that looked exactly like that one. And people used to swim in between them like we did with the goalposts. And somebody broke it. And you see how thin it is. So we both stay away from it. That's one thing you don't want to do. Like, you want to go to these places and you want to preserve it exactly as you found it for more people to come and dive. Hopefully one of you watching this video feel inspired to go and see this with your own eyes. I hope you do. And I hope I'm there with you. Honestly, take me with you. I want to go there again and again and again and again. Look at that tower of crystal. It's ridiculous. So these are called wedding cakes because you can see they have layers. Like one layer comes, then the next layer comes, then the next layer, then the next layer, then the next layer. So they are like a wedding cake, and that's what they're called. But they looks like a crystal waterfall, to be honest. And I've heard that term before. You see, Brian is still carrying his bottle, his stage bottle. This thing right here. He's still carrying it like no big deal. Look at the size of that wedding cake. And then there's one behind it that's even bigger. That's so cool. I agree, Benjamin. Look how big that is. That's not even a wedding cake. That's a waterfall. Waterfall of crystal. Look at that thing. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it really is. It's unbelievable. And obviously seeing it in person is even better. Look at that thing. From down there, that's probably like 6 meters down there, below the line where Benjamin is. And then he goes, I don't know, 10 meters up from there. I mean, they're just humongous. I think Brian said these are 50 feet tall, which is right around, what is it, like 15 meters tall? That's pretty big. Maybe more than 15 meters. They're huge. And again, I've been here before. I've done this dive before. I'm like, look at that thing. How big it is. What? Look at that single stalagmite right there. Careful, Ben. And I'm just floating right next to it. Look at Brian. Brian is kind of like not exactly at the middle, but he's, you know, he's not at the bottom either. And this thing keeps going. Look at all those draperies coming on the side. He's lighting them up so now you can see him in better detail. Look how big that is. It's awesome. I can't imagine what was going through Brian's head when he found this room. Brian Keiko actually found FANGORN Forest. Can you see I'm following the line and swimming? This is awesome, isn't it? Yeah, we go that way now. I love that Benjamin was so excited about it. It is awesome. So this little thing right here on the left, you can see Brian is shining his light on it. Honestly, I feel like this is... Okay, this is awesome. Honestly, I feel like Brian put that thing in there. Because I can't explain how he got there. It's like... Alright, so it's like a fissure on the wall. And there's this rock sticking out. But obviously we didn't touch it. But Brian says that rock can fall off. Like if you bump it, it's just like wedged in there. Like how did that rock wedge itself in there? Somebody put that in there. It's a conspiracy theory I'm starting. Look at that. It's just perfectly wedged. So now we're doing a swim to something called Wrigley Field. Brian found this room as well. And he said it reminded him of a baseball stadium. Like a really, really big baseball stadium. So he named this room Wrigley Field. Wrigley Field, for those of you who don't know, because you don't like baseball or because you live outside the U.S., is the iconic baseball stadium where the Chicago Cubs play. Fun fact about Wrigley Field. I mean, so huge. That's right. It's humongous. You see how big that room is. That's Wrigley Field. We're at Wrigley Field right now. And it just keeps going. I mean, it's massive. It's like an airplane hangar or like a baseball stadium. But fun fact, check me and drop a comment below. I feel like I remember hearing about this. I think Wrigley Field was the last stadium to get lights installed. And the last stadium who kind of resisted the idea of having night games. They were only playing day games. Like all the other stadiums had lights and playing night games, and Wrigley Field was like, no. Until something happened. I think like the Chicago Cubs threatened to leave or something. And so the owners of the field were forced. I don't know if that's all true, but I'm pretty sure Wrigley Field was the last stadium to get lights in Major League Baseball. Look at that tank. Ugh. I don't know how you guys can stand it. I can't. Terrible. Alright, so from Wrigley Field, there's this area on the top right, like hidden back there, and you can start seeing crystal and stalactites all over the place when you get there, that Brian calls this the cheap seats. Okay, so we're now swimming to the cheap seats. Now, when Woody and I went to the cheap seats in 2022, the first time I went to Abaco, he said that less than 50 people have been there. This is pretty far back in the cave. So for open circuit divers that don't have a rebreather like us, you can see that we're not really blowing bubbles out. There's some bubbles here and there because we're going up and volume increases. We have to let go of air. But for divers that are in open circuit, side mount divers, whatever, this is a multiple stage, dive. Perhaps you're setting up stages one day and then come back the next day and dive. And I mean, it's a long dive. Jonathan Bird did this dive in open circuit for the movie Ancient Caves. He actually talks about that. How long the dive was and the deco was and all that stuff. The other thing Brian told us is that you see these stalactites right here? They're like hair thin. They're like super thin. They're all over the ceiling, and they are so fragile that they break with bubbles. So, we are trying not to blow any bubbles in here, although sometimes, a little bit of bubbles here and there come out, of course. But for open circuit divers, they have no choice, They're excelling, so the bubbles go up, and he breaks them. He breaks just the bubbles hitting them. That's how fragile they are. And as a matter of fact, the whole floor is covered in stalactites that broke because of bubbles. And Benjamin will actually swim to it, and you get to see them up close. So here we go. You see all of those? They look like drumsticks, from playing drums. Those are all stalactites that broke because of bubbles. They're all over the place. So we try not to blow bubbles in this area. Look how thin that stalagmite is on the right. Some of these look like they've been here for a long time. So before even divers were here. Sometimes, by the way, you see some of this crystal and you feel like it's loose, and you try to pick it up, and it's embedded into the crystal below. Like you fell, who knows how many thousands of years ago. And other crystal kind of glued it to it, so you cannot pick it up. It's pretty cool. He's showing us more stuff, whereas I got distracted by something that I'm about to show you right now. Look at my light. I'm like, Brian, there's a giant hole down there. Where does that hole go? Can we go there? Look at that. I'm showing it to Benjamin. Like, Benjamin, there's a hole down there. Let's go find out. But of course, we were following the line. There's no line down there to that hole. Now, I believe that inside the hole, there's a line. And I can see that because, I don't know if you noticed, and you can rewind if you want. I'm not going to rewind because there's still more to go on this dive. But if you go back, you can see there's a double arrow in the line. That typically indicates a jump. It indicates that, hey, tie here to go to another line. And the line is in that hole down there. But we didn't go. It was just like, I wonder what's down there, Look at that beautiful drapery. Look at this one. Big one that Brian is lighting up. It's huge. All of this stuff is crystal, of course. Look at that thing. It looks like a huge curtain of some kind. It's not even draperies anymore. It's like a cape. And you can see Brian's size, who's not, he's not a small dude. Compare with how big that drapery is. Benjamin is gonna get close to it. I'm just looking at it like, wow, amazing. I'm like, I don't even know what to tell you. I don't even know. It's amazing. So cool. That's right. Look how beautiful that is. Now we're very, very close to the cheap seats. This is again the path to get to it. But at some point I will point out the marker that says cheap seats. Again, very careful. Look at that thing on the right. No, 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 don't kick it. Oof. Okay, I didn't kick it. I'm like, check this out. The cheap seats. Beautiful. We made it. So less than 50 people have been there as of 2022. Not sure if there's more than 50 now in 2023, but there's definitely not a whole lot of people that have made it back there all the way to cheap seats inside of Dan's Cave in Abaco. I hope that you're watching this video, and I hope you do make it there and get to see this with your own eyes, because it's priceless. That is so cool. You know, I think that these trips to Abaco, people write them off as they're so expensive. And they are. I'm not going to lie. They're not something you can do every other weekend. Unless you're, I don't know, Elon Musk or something. If you're very rich, then of course you can do this all the time. But, you know, it's one of those trips that you do once a year. And you go back every year because there's just unlimited things to see in this cave. But the challenge is, you know, for people like us, for example, I'm 4 to 5 hours away from cave country. I live in Georgia. Cave country's in Florida. You know, if you start like doing comparison, if you say, well, why would I go and spend $2,000 to go diving here when I can go for 3 weekends in a row to Florida? Like, that's just the wrong way to go about it. And what Brian was doing there, by the way, is lighting up the life that we find in the cave. You see these tiny little translucent creatures. Benjamin is lighting up in the camera, and then he went away. But yeah, the little translucent creatures, critters that we find inside the caves. Look how big this room is. This is Wrigley Field. Now we're on the way back. So once you make it to cheap seats, we start going on our way back, and Brian said, let's spread apart. There's no silt in this place. The room is too big, and the line's pretty easy to find. So he's like, let's split out so we can show the viewers how big it is. So you can see Brian is all the way down there, and I will be on the right. Benjamin is on the back. That's all the way down there, like who knows how many, 50 feet, 60 feet, like 20 meters away. And I am... Where am I? Oh yeah, I'm all the way out there. How far everything is, and the cave keeps going. I mean, this is a massive, massive room. When you do this dive, by the way, Brian will ask you, because you know it's a 3-hour dive, so you can't spend like an hour in FANGORN Forest and an hour here, because then you'll be underwater for like 6 hours. So he will ask you if you want to do the quick dive through FANGORN and make it to cheap seats, or if you just want to spend time in FANGORN and skip Wrigley Field and cheap seats. Both times we've chosen to go to the cheap seats. It's a longer dive. There's a lot more swimming, but the fact that only a handful of people in history have been back there makes it really special. So we're on our way back. Notice that we're staying up high as possible, because this is the second passage. It's a deep passage. This one goes to like 140, so like 40 something meters. So we're trying to stay as high as possible. Good news is that around here in the ceiling there's no formation, so we don't have to worry about knocking anything down. And notice we're back at FANGORN, and that's the bottle that Brian staged, which is at the end on the back of FANGORN before you head for Wrigley. So he's picking up his stage. And then we're going to go behind these giant wedding cakes, these towers of crystal. So he said, look, on the way back, let's not take the same path. Let's just go behind the tower so you can see behind them, you know, what's behind them. So we're swimming behind. Notice that there's no line, right? And we do get this question like, why don't you tether yourself to the line? That way you don't lose it. Look, visibility is so good, and we're so far from the ground below that the line being on the other side of this mountain, it's good enough for cave divers. Like, we know the line is there. If something happens, let's say, I don't know, some freak accident where all of our lights go out, all I have to do is, by feel, swim behind this mountain, and the line will be right behind it. So I just swim around it. It's not a big deal. But for that to happen, you know, each one of us has 3 or 4 lights. Like, I dive with 4, but the minimum requirement is 3. So you're talking about anywhere between 9 and 12 flashlights fail at the same time. That's, you know, almost impossible. It's not impossible, but, you know, it's like winning the lottery 3 weekends in a row. So you're about to see the line right behind this wall. And even if we were swimming on the line, we wouldn't tether ourselves to the line because the line is tied in a bunch of different places, right? So every time you hit a little stalagmite or whatever where the line is tied, you would have to untether yourself, I mean, it's a pain. Nobody wants. So look, I'm lighting up another hole right here. I'm like, hey, what about that hole? What's down there? And obviously Brian is always like, nah, there's nothing. I've been there. There's only like 10 feet and then there's nothing. Yeah, okay. I bet there's a bunch of places around here that Brian has been and he's like, I'm not taking these idiots. They're going to break everything if I go there. So he doesn't put a line to them. And, you know, I respect that because you don't want to break all this stuff. Look at these formations. Now check this out. So typically when you see stalactites that are like this one in the middle, it's just like it just goes down because these are, you know, caused or created by dripping water, right? So the water is dripping. The water has minerals in it, so it leaves a layer and a layer and a layer over time. It takes years, thousands of years in some cases to build this stuff. And I know some of you always chime in with how fast stalactites can grow depending on where they are and all that stuff. I don't really know how long it takes to build these, but the cool thing about it is that some of them are not stalactites, which are the ones that grow from the ceiling, or stalagmites, which are the ones that are growing from the bottom, but they're called halactites, and they grow sideways. So you can see one right here, right? This is sideways. Look at this thing. He just came like this, and he goes like that. Then he has a line through it, a little hook going up. You know, these ones are all like hooks all over the place. And apparently, Brian was telling us this, it has been proven that these are grown by bacteria. So like bacteria will be in the water, and then for some reason they're all like, hey guys, you want to go up? Sure. And then they all start going up, and then along the way, water and the minerals are forming around the bacteria, and it grows in all kinds of weird places. Now you're gonna see some more radical halactites in other places, but this is a cool example of the formations that you get to see in Fangorn Forest, where it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, in some places, it looks like spaghetti. Like the bacteria just went to town and made spaghetti, crystal spaghetti. So this is all Fangorn Forest again. We're swimming our way back. Being very, very careful. Like, imagine I lost my buoyancy right there. That stalagmite below me would be gone. That's a big one, the one on the left. He looks small, but it's actually pretty thick. And obviously it's made of crystal. Thanks, Ben, for pointing that out. Crystal everywhere. This is an interesting one. So this one grew up. The bacteria decided to make like a, looks like a butterfly wing type of thing. So when you look at it close by, it looks like a butterfly wing. All these shapes. It's amazing. And you can get pretty close to it, but obviously you don't want to hit it. So you have to be very careful. Look at that thing. Looks like hair. This is all pure crystal, and it just grew in all these weird shapes because of bacteria. Amazing. Look at that thing. Looks like spaghetti. Crystal spaghetti. I think he gets closer, Ben does. Let's see. Yeah, look at that. It's bent in all kinds of shapes and forms, and it's really cool. And along the way, you're giving it, you know, kind of names and shapes. Like some of them will look like butterfly wings, and some of them will look like a chicken wing or whatever. And Brian will have those names for it. And those are the goalposts that we went through on the way in. Look at that column. It collapsed, and then a stalagmite grew on top of it. How cool is that? Like, how long ago did that piece of column collapse? That the stalagmite grew on top of it. So yeah, crystal everywhere. So as you exit Fangorn Forest, it gets tighter and tighter. So you have to be careful when you go out. Now notice that in a few of these shots, I'm lower than Brian and Benjamin. Benjamin is shooting me from above. And I actually paid for that because I had the longest deco of the group. Now all of us stay together. You always stay together till the last person finishes their deco. You know, if someone is going to have problems, most likely, look at these shapes. I promise you we're going to stop by on the way back. But if someone is going to have an issue, like going to get bent or something like that, it's probably going to be at the end of the dive once they have all that nitrogen in their system. So we don't leave anyone behind. Okay, so here's another example of looking for shapes and stuff and giving it names. Brian calls this the turkey head. He says he looks like a turkey looking up. I don't know if I agree. You be the judge, but let's turn the lights on. Does that look like a turkey looking up? I don't know. Do you see it? Anyway. He claims that's a chicken head or a turkey head, and he does the chicken dance and everything when he swims by it. We didn't film that part. We're going to leave that for your viewing pleasure when you get to go in person. And he's pointing the jump. We make the jump. We keep swimming. The swimming out is really pretty, of course. There's crystal everywhere. Nothing like Fangorn. Fangorn is a whole nother level, but we are swimming on the way back. And there's like a bird theme on this dive. Like right now we're swimming, I remember, to something called the bird bath. It's like this pool of crystal that looks like a bird bath. And once again, it's just our effort as humans to give everything meaning and make everything match the stuff that we're used to. So this is the bird bath. It just grew up like that. All crystal, yeah? The whole mountain. And that is it. I actually take the camera from Ben and get it closer. Well, here, let me have the camera. Look at that. That's the birdhouse. Come on, let's get some better lighting so people can see. Here, I take the camera. Yeah, it looks like ice of some kind, but it's all crystal pools. So, like, they see those ones? They broke, but they melted into the crystal. But yeah, this is the birdhouse. The circle. That's so cool. I agree. Yeah. Looks awesome. And obviously when you shine your light on it, it turns like amber. And he looks so cool in person. That's awesome. And you see, so let's take a look at this. I got several messages from you guys saying that you really enjoyed the breakdown of the computer. So let's do it again. So here's the depth, 69 feet. So that's about 21 meters, if my math is right. 21, 22 meters. We've been underwater for 101 minutes, so over an hour and a half, an hour and 41 minutes. And my first deco stop will be at 20 feet or 6 meters for 29 minutes. So you can see when you start racking up deco, it is a mandatory stop. I cannot come out to the surface for at least 29 minutes. I still have 2,400 PSI, let's just say. So that is, let's see, 2396 divided by 14.7 equals 163 bar of O2, for those of you who are in bar, and 2892 of bailout. So bailout gas is 197 bar, right? So 200 is a full tank. So you can see with a rebreather, even though I've been underwater for an hour and 40 minutes, I mean, I still have pretty full tanks. Then 1.2 is the set point on this offboard computer. This is a Petrol 3, shear water Petrol 3. And my stack timer says I have 2 hours and 23 minutes left on it. This is how long will the chemical in my canisters be good for. So I'm an hour and 41 minutes in. I still have 2 hours and 23 minutes to go. This dive, like I said, it's not longer than 3 hours. So I have plenty of stack timer. So I'm in closed circuit, 21% oxygen, 0% helium. That's air. The ceiling, that's what CEIL is 20 feet. It's telling me do not go past 20 feet. Sometimes the ceiling will change. So like it will tell you 15 or something like that. Like, okay, you can stop at 20, but if you go at 15, it's okay. Typically in deco dives, the ceiling will match the stop. It will say do not go over that. And then the TTS, or time to surface, that's what that means, is 31 minutes. And that's because, again, this guy feels that I am, he doesn't know that I'm in a cave. The computer doesn't know that I'm in a cave. So he's saying, okay, you have 29 minutes, and then an ascent rate of 30 feet per minute, approximately. From 69 feet, it will take you 2 minutes to go. So 29 plus 2, that's 31. That's what that computer, everything in that computer means. I think I got everything. If you have any questions, let me know. This one still says no comms, and that's because I don't have a second bailout tank connected to this computer. I do have it when I dive the Sidewinder, though. Double bailouts. All right, so we're on the way back. I still don't have the stage, but this is what we do on Deco. We watch videos. Awesome dive. All right, well, that's a wrap.
Yeah.
Fangorn to wrap up an amazing trip to Abaco in 2023. Look at the weather.
Oh, the weather's perfect.
It's unbelievable.
It's perfect.
This is the perfect time of the year to come, and we're coming back next year. We got to come back.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Oh, no. This twice a year.
Unbelievable. It was amazing. By the way, if by any chance you missed day 3, where we went to the glass factory, go ahead and click on it right here. I'm going to leave it for you. You can check it out. You could, what do you do?
Click here.
All right. That's good enough. Thank you, man, by the way. Thanks for coming.
Awesome trip. Awesome week in Abaco. Shout out to Brian at Bahamas Underground for driving us around, showing us the wonderful caves here.
Great food.
Yep.
Awesome. See you on the next one.
Yep. See you guys.